Welcome to America Uncanceled. I'm Mercedes Schlapp along with Matt Schlapp. Well, across the country, public schools have been filling their libraries with pornographic novels and radical gender theory for underage children to read. While some schools have been quick to correct their mistakes, others stand in stark opposition, doing everything in their power to subvert parents, even sue parents, and keep pornographic books on their shelves. Joining us today are two brave moms who are all too familiar with unhinged public schools that continue to push this radicalized agenda, pushing for pornography in our public schools. After speaking out against subversive books in their children's school libraries, parents Christina Ballestieri and Kristen Cobo are now countersuing a school librarian after being sued themselves for simply bringing the problem to the public's attention. Christina and Kristen join us now. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining CPAC Now.
So we've been reading about the fact that the Biden administration and the Southern Poverty Law Center are going after moms. When did you feel that you were kind of threatening all these people in the public school system by simply asking basic questions about what's appropriate in your kids' libraries and in your neighbors' kids' libraries?
I didn't really think anybody would view that as a threat. I'm shocked until we got served with a lawsuit. It's shocking that this is happening. Just because we found these things, we brought them to the attention of all the correct individuals in administration and then the Board of Ed when nothing was done, and which is exactly the protocol you're supposed to follow. And yet we were served with a lawsuit.
I thought that was actually quite shocking that a school librarian would file a lawsuit. I'm assuming that she's definitely supported by some bigger folks that encouraged her to do so. But Kristen, let me ask you, what pretty much prompted you to say, okay, we got to speak up now? This is actually happening in Roxbury High School. I've seen some of the images that were shared with us regarding some of these books that are in this high school library, whether it's like this book is gay, gender queer, the list goes on and on. What made you say, I got to speak up now, I got to take action?
So I think as a parent and as a mental health therapist, when I saw those images, I had to say something. You can't stay quiet. We have to stand up and start protecting our children against the sexualization or the attempt to sexualize them in this country. It's at the point now where parents are being silenced for doing the right thing by their children. And I think that anybody in our shoes would have done similar. We went and we spoke and we basically said, we want to bring this to your attention, because we assumed that if any other adult would have seen those pictures, they wouldn't have been keeping them in the school library.
So you go and you complain and you say, look, this is inappropriate material, and they say what?
So we went and started speaking to the superintendent and assistant superintendent. We then were directed towards the librarian. We spoke to her. She confirmed that the books were there. So we then started speaking out at the Board of Ed meetings, bringing a lot of information to their attention, the content of the books. We were going after the sexually explicit content. We are now being painted in a false light by the librarian and her attorney husband. We are being painted as anti-LGBTQ, and we are being called book burners, all of which are false.
Right.
We were attacking the sexually explicit content in the books, not the subject.
Let me ask you, Christina, Roxbury Media, they this was September of 2022, they tweeted out, it's Banned Books Week, and I want to remind everyone to exercise your right to read what you want. They then tag on this New York Times article, attempts to ban books are accelerating and becoming more divisive. I think, Kristen, you mentioned this whole ban books mentality, but I mean, the reality is that this material, as you mentioned, I mean, it's pornographic, it's inappropriate for these children and these young adults, even in high school, to read. What has been basically the response from your community? Do you feel that it's divided? Do you feel that half the folks are with you, or more than half, and other parents saying, look, my kid can read whatever they want?
We're blessed with a lot of support in the community. I mean, our supporters are just amazing. But unfortunately, it's a divided community because many people have been manipulated by this narrative of it's all anti-LGBTQ. They're not Either they're not viewing the books in question or they're just believing that story, and they're not coming to us where we can say, listen, there are over 175 books on the topic of LGBTQ in that library, and we have an issue with 9 and 2 books that have nothing to do with the community.
Right.
You know,
Right. And I think at this point, we went to a Board of Ed meeting about 2 weeks ago now, and the opposition showed up after the librarian and teachers union put out a plea for all people in the name of LGBTQ rights to come out and quote unquote silence us and put an end to this. They're being basically told that we're going after their community when that is completely false. So we had many attacks. We had to be escorted back to our cars after the board meeting because people were making threats and screaming at us. So it's been tough, but to be honest, we do have a lot of support from the silent majority.
yeah, it's good for you, and I'm sorry that too many of us are silent on a lot of these issues for too long. But let me ask you a couple of questions on this book burning thing and this book banning thing. Did you go to the library and see if the Bible was there on the shelf?
We did.
Was it there?
It's there.
It is
there.
Okay, well, that's good.
That's promising.
How about the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution? Was it there?
I haven't checked that one. I haven't looked into that one, but
Well,
I will.
You should check, because usually great novels like Gone with the Wind and writings from our founders are usually not amongst the books. So when they accuse us of trying to ban books, it's actually them who are trying to ban books. And the second question about being anti-LGBTQ, there's a question about what's appropriate, right, in a school setting, and also respecting everyone's values, including Christians who would be appalled with these books, whether it was showing kids how to have heterosexual sex, homosexual sex. They would say, it's not like our society isn't sexualized enough. Perhaps at school, they should learn to read and write and understand history and not be sexualized and encouraged to be sexually active at even younger ages. When you make that argument, what does the school say to that?
So basically, they ignore our argument and they continue to go back to the fact that they do not want to ban books. And as parental rights advocates in our town, we've been driving this point home that we should direct the upbringing of our children, not the school system.
Right.
So if you want to share sexually explicit content with your children, there's a public library a mile down the road, and there's Amazon. So you can go on and buy whatever book you want to show your child. That's your choice. But we feel that no educational system should have the right to take it upon themselves to offer minor children sexually explicit material.
So, Christina, let me ask you, you all have taken this then into really creating a parental rights group as well. So, as other parents are listening to the show and, they're trying to figure out what to do, how to get organized, what's your advice to these parents who may be facing similar problems in their own high schools?
Advice is to reach out to other people. I mean, we both were fighting a battle on our own until we met each other, and then it took off. And many people either don't know what's happening but would be upset when they do. And there are also a lot of people fighting the battle thinking they're on their own. So talk to people, let them know, and organize and research. You have to have the backup with the information before you take the battle on.
Yeah, and I would also say, don't be afraid to stand up for your children. I feel like this is our last shot.
Yes.
We have to do right by our kids, and it doesn't matter how they paint you. They can call you whatever they want. It doesn't make you what they say you are. So I think that strength in numbers and being confident in your parental rights and knowing that you know what's best for your kids.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if parents got to decide these basic questions of sexuality for their kids? So give us some hope. You go, I assume there's a school board that oversees the school?
Yep.
You talk about the silent majority. Is there hope that there'll be enough pushback from your community to the school board members, who I assume are elected, for them to understand this is a serious question?
That's absolutely what many in the community are willing to do. And there are 4 members on that board that did try to have those books removed, and they were voted down. So most of the community looks at that and just says, okay, we need to wipe out the whole board. Tell us who to vote for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me just ask a follow-up question. So there's 4 members of the board, and some of them tried to get the books removed, or was it the bureaucrats who said no to the board?
They just tried to get them moved.
So there's 10 board members.
Okay, got it.
Okay,
Got it.
so
So
you
you
need a
have a
majority.
minority. Got it.
Yeah.
4 voted to put the books behind the counter
Yeah.
and allow them out only with parental consent, and 6 board members said no, we want them to be
Yeah,
out.
they voted that down.
I mean, that's just outrageous. I think the idea of just even asking for parental consent would be the right approach, especially when you're talking about minors. These are not, adults over the age of 18. I do want to ask you, so you all have been sued, which I know must be very jarring, especially coming from a school librarian.
Who works for you, by the way? You're paying her
you're
salary.
paying her salary. But, and then did you all countersue?
We did. We just filed a countersuit last week, and we also filed a third-party complaint against the attorney, her husband, for defamation.
So why would the librarian sue you for simply having the school board have a vote as to whether or not you deserve to have parental consent before your child rents out pornographic materials?
We truly feel that it's an attempt to silence us and anybody else watching us. I think even though we are not easily scared and we're not going to back down, we're going to continue in this fight. I think that so many people are looking at us and saying, is that worth it? To us, it is. And we encourage anybody else to stand up with us.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you, I know that I was a avid Target shopper for a long time, and now we've had to sit down with our kids and say, we're not going to Target anymore, between the fact that they push such a strong kind of gender ideology. On top of that, they're collaborating with a satanic designer, just really going against everything we stand for. And obviously Target has really felt it now when you're talking about the fact that they've lost billions of dollars. Let me get your sense. Are you also sensing in your community that moms have said, we've had it, we're going to, shop, with our dollars somewhere else? Walk me through what's happening in your neck of the woods. I know here in Northern Virginia, I know a lot of moms are saying the same thing I am, which is, I'm not going back to Target.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing. I think that it all comes down to parental rights and what you want your kids to have access to and what they're exposed to from an early age. And you walk into Target with a 2-year-old, they shouldn't be seeing some of the things that are on display there. We shouldn't be discussing sexuality with 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds. It's ridiculous. They don't understand or grasp those concepts based on their developmental level. So why are we pushing that in retail? I think that people are fed up. I think that they're trying to take our rights away, and we're not having it.
Yeah, well, good for you guys. Kind of the final question on this whole idea of them with the slur against you that you're anti-LGBTQ, the question really is not whether or not you're tolerant towards what adults might decide to do. The question is, how should your kids be sexualized? And then you can't really talk about sex without talking about the morality behind the decisions that are made associated with it. And it seems to me that's obvious. That's for parents. Have the people pushing this agenda, have they realized that at tender ages, if you have to push trans and push the concept of gay sex or whatever, they realize that you can't do that without talking about the sex part of it. And if you talk about the sex part of it, you're of course crossing moral lines. Do they not figure that out, or they just think they're smarter than us and that they'll manipulate us and just keep radicalizing our kids?
I think there's a line really where, I'm not against sex ed being taught in school at all, but when you move from sex for reproduction and start teaching sex for pleasure, you're pushing an agenda, whether it's heterosexual or homosexual. It doesn't matter. It's not the school's place.
Yeah, sex for pleasure, sex for recreation. And if you look at these books, there'd be so many lessons we could teach kids. And there's so many great books that if they would read about some of the basic moral and ethical questions.
I don't know. Talk about like speaking about reading and math and learning how to be a good person and be kind to others. It's so basic to me. And what's happened is this over sexualization of our society being imposed on our children, where, you know, parents now, I read a tweet of a parent who said that that the 7-year-old daughter came to him and said, hey, what's a transvestite? And so at 7 years old, these children shouldn't have to be exposed to this. This is something that the parents are responsible for teaching their children and not allowing the rest of society to basically indoctrinate, infiltrate the minds of our children and take away their innocence. And I think it's just so destructive for our society.
Yeah, and I want to just say thank you for your courage and for standing up. When I read articles yesterday at the Southern Poverty Law Center was calling groups of moms that have spontaneously pulled together to try to fight some of this stuff that's in curriculums and in libraries. You know, they're being called haters and they're being called terrorists. And I think everyone ought to take a pause on that kind of language and say, you know, parents have a right. This is America. You have a First Amendment right to make sure your schools are doing the right thing. And I encourage, you know, the left has always done a very good job of stepping up and protesting and letting their voice be heard. And I don't know what your politics are, and I don't think your politics really matter here, but if parents want to stand up and express their views on what they think is appropriate, why aren't we just saying, good, you have the right to do that? I might disagree with what you're saying, although I don't know who could disagree with what you two are saying.
Yeah.
And why you have to get sued for saying it is just, it's outrageous.
Right, and I would encourage parents to take a look at some of those books. For example, one of the books called This Book is Gay, it encourages children to go on a gay sex app called Grindr. When we're talking about keeping kids safe, why is a school promoting a sex app where they can get unattached sex with adults? I think that we really need to like step back and look at where we're at as a society.
Yeah, and you know, the victims of being on those sites for minors who can be victimized by adults, as you're saying, is really, it's a big part of this. We're seeing an epidemic of young people being trafficked for sexual reasons and other reasons. And the last thing I'd want for any of our 5 daughters is to have them be encouraged by someone they might otherwise respect to engage in sexual conduct with adults who we don't even know. I mean, this is insane. And talk about being sued. I think the authors of these books and the people pushing this should be sued. There comes a line when our kids are just, you know, they're off base for this stuff.
Right.
Anyway, thank you both for your great advocacy and for your voice. And we'd love to check back in with you and see how it's going up there in New Jersey.
That would be great. Thank you so much for having us and for all you do.
Thanks, Christine and Kristen, for joining us. And remember, if you miss an episode, you can always go back and watch it on our website at cpac.org/now, or you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. We'll talk to you soon, and God bless.